All right, welcome to our next lesson. This could be our final lesson. We'll see how this goes. So, if you're probably that's looking familiar, the map or the slide I have up right now. I wanted to start off just showing the split empire again, the idea of a Western Roman Empire and an Eastern Roman Empire. As we start talking about these things that start happening to both of them. By the way, it's always a constant. Rome is always dealing with the barbarian invasions. In the beginning, they easily deal with it, like we're talking about the 100s, 200s AD. Well, mostly. But then it just becomes almost something that they can't deal with very well, almost impossible, into like the 400s AD. So, kind of how does this go, basically? Well, it all starts off, I shouldn't say starts off, it culminates with, at least in the beginning, with a group of barbarians, at least the Romans view them as barbarians. They're called the Huns. So they basically come in from Central Asia, or migrate in, and they settle on what's called the Hungarian plain. And then they just start raiding everybody. And there's actually some cases where the Huns, they'll kind of sell out, like the Romans might hire a tribe of them here and there to help them out with their battles against other barbarian tribes, or to help out in civil wars. But they kind of do their own thing until they actually unite, like all those Hunnic tribes unite under the leadership of a guy named Attila. The famed Attila the Hun, basically. Under Attila the Hun, he just ravages both the Eastern Empire and the Western Empire, and it culminates into a battle called the Battle of Troyes. And this is actually a pretty cool story, and I do not have time to go into it. At least I don't think I have time to go into it. But if you want to look up the Battle of Troyes and all the intrigue and all the stuff that goes into that, it's a cool story. Crazy, but cool. But it pretty much is fought to a standstill. But in a standstill, you could say that the Romans, along with all of their allies, like all the other barbarians join in, like a bunch of Germans and Goths and the Franks, they all actually kind of get together in this big coalition to go against the Huns. And it was like the idea of like, join or die type thing, like kind of going back to the whole Greeks against Persia type thing. And they hold their own, and they're able to beat off this unbeatable horde, which is the Hun army. Attila, pretty ticked off that he wasn't able to kind of just get his way there, goes back, gets married to I think it was like a third wife or something like that, and then dies of a nosebleed. And so then the Huns kind of separated into their kind of different factions, and they're still a threat, but they're never the major threat that they were under the leadership of Attila from that point on, but still a major threat. But they settle in basically in the areas of which is today southern Germany and like all the way over to Hungary. Anyways, just to give you some background there, like you could say like family trees in that area. So then you have a group of barbarians, or Gothic tribe called the Visigoths that they come from all the way over, we think, from more towards like Ukraine. That map I don't think really shows it that well. It says they come up from like Scandinavia. And I've seen a lot of different things on like where the Visigoths really came from. Again, it's unsure, but definitely from the area of Ukraine. There's a lot of things that go into there, especially with the Battle of Adrianople. That's a major battle in Roman history where the Visigoths basically just trounce the Romans. And then they're kind of paid off, and then they kind of make their way throughout the Roman Empire until they finally settle in Spain. And this is the whole idea, though, is that they're an empire to themselves within Rome. So you have the Western Roman Empire, yes, but then you have the Visigoths right there that are just this entity. And they kind of do their own thing. It's like, well, who's in charge right now? Is it the Roman guy or is it the Visigothic guy? And over time it becomes more the Gothic guys in charge. And this shows how kind of Rome falls, is that people are just shifting towards these barbarians that are coming in, just kind of staking claim. And it also shows one of the problems of that whole thing that I talked about earlier with the cosmopolitan society. There's like, well, what if the Goths were allowed to integrate more with the Romans? They're always viewed as like these other evil people. I shouldn't say evil people, but these other people that just, you're you and you'll never be me type thing. You'll never be with like me, even if you want to. And if the Goths were more integrated into Roman culture and society, well, maybe things could have perpetuated. They refuse to adapt to that. Let's put it that way. And you get to a group of people called the Vandals, do the same thing. They actually end up fighting against the Visigoths and other barbarian tribes, but they get pushed down to northern Africa, and then they set up there, and then they kind of become their own Vandal kingdom in North Africa, with their capital city being Carthage, interesting enough. Then from there, they start attacking the coastlines of Italy, like, oh, the ghost of Hannibal coming back type thing. So, but now they have their own little kingdom there, and the Romans have to deal with that. And again, if you just integrate them, make them more Roman, maybe things would have gone better. But no, that's not the way it goes. So, and then basically they lose control of Britain. You have those Angles, Jutes, and Saxons that just kind of tear apart Britain. And basically it is no longer part of Rome. And then you have the Frankish tribe in, what becomes France later on, that becomes the dominant tribe of Gaul, but later on Francia or France. So I hope you've just seen this through all these barbarians coming in, and just, yes, they get beat, but then again, they beat the Romans sometimes, and then all of a sudden the Romans pay them, and it's like, well, the Visigoths, your army this time, but no, we're fighting you next time. Like, it's just not working out. And the final straw comes in, or the final straw that breaks the camel's back is when the Ostrogoths, who are being paid by the Romans, bribed by the Romans to watch their northern border, are basically called to come down and deal with like a major rebellion. And this rebellion was basically caused by, that bread and circuses stuff when it comes down to it. There's more that goes into it than just that, yes, but a lot of it's the bread and circuses, where the Roman people are feeling like, we don't have enough to eat. We don't, you're not giving us what you promised, emperor, give us what we're supposed to get. And their army is feeling like that they're being ignored, and so the Ostrogoths are called down to basically put down this rebellion, and holy cow, did they put it down. And the Ostrogoths, they put it down in the city of Rome, by the way. Tons of people die. And then the Ostrogoths just decide, we're staying. And that's viewed as the official end of Rome, where it wasn't really this epic struggle, Titanic type thing that happens. It was more of just this, we're falling, and we fell. And it was just kind of like, there was just no way to stop that fall. Just from everything I'm kind of explaining here, it just goes down. So, in looking at this in the fall of Rome and with these barbarian invasions, it just, by the way, all these barbarian invasions are going on basically between the late 300s to the 400s AD, basically the last 100 years of the life of the empire. Well, we kind of see, like, how do I put this? There are a myriad of reasons why Rome falls overall. We can say, well, this happened, so that caused the fall, and that happened, so that caused the fall. But it can be summed up in a few things, and it goes back to those early things that we talked about was the foundation of Roman power and prosperity at the beginning of the Republic. So, and since then, it's just been this rise to power and this domination, and just this slow fall. The cracks are there. It's going to fall at some point. Just the impressive thing about Rome is that, holy cow, they stave off fully falling for a very long time, much longer than anybody else in history ever did. So, but here's basically, this is the last bit. This is going to be the last lesson on Rome, but here's the last things to know about the fall of Rome. First off, they don't hold to those traditional values. What it means to be a Roman at the beginning of the Republic is not what it means to be Roman at the end of the empire. Those are two very different thought processes that are there, and there is a very good argument to be put in place. I definitely would say a very good argument to be put in place of, what made Rome Rome in the beginning is not there at the end, and if it was there, things most definitely would have been different. So, basically, no more loyalty to when we talk about these traditional values, there's no more loyalty to that country. There's no discipline and self-sacrifice. Instead, this idea that, especially with those assassinations we talked about in the earlier lesson, that comes to this idea that you're greedy for power or greedy for wealth, or just you're willing to kind of stab your friend to get ahead, that type idea. And just there's no stability with that. And you lose this sense, along with the idea of no loyalty to country, then you lose this sense of responsibility and duty. It becomes all about me and protecting mine and getting ahead for mine. Whether you're on the lowest end of the spectrum, like just kind of like this serf laborer on the plantations, because by the way, again, there's so many things to cover, but it is argued, a good argument is that really at the end of Rome, medieval times, like this whole feudalistic situation, like the knights and castles types thing, is really starting to come into play, where you just kind of have the nobles, the upper classes, then you have pretty much like the slave labor at the bottom, the serfs. You have there's really no middle class in place. So, anyways, forgot how I segued into that one, but you just don't have this sense of responsibility and duty any longer. Like whatever position you have in Roman society, you don't really view the idea of the survival of Rome as a priority. Let's put it that way. If you have to, you have to, or if you get caught, you get caught. But you're not going to do it out of a sense of loyalty. And then one of the biggest ones that is the cause of pretty much every fall of every empire in human history is this sense of the populace in general to an entitled sense to an unsustainable standard of living, meaning that you feel like you deserve a certain type of life, and so you, gosh darn, better well be given it. You shouldn't have to work for it, that type of thing. And then there's also the idea of manipulating that, and that goes back to when I was basically talking about the whole bread and circuses thing earlier, when we were talking about growing problems within the empire in that earlier lesson. So now, that's all just one major reason, the idea of not holding those traditional values that made Rome, that allowed them just to expand so well in the first place. Before I get into the don't adapt to new circumstances, like when you read Roman history, really get into it, you get this feeling like, man, they're just so powerful. They have all these armies. They're just unstoppable. And then especially the last 100 years of Roman existence, it's like, where are they? Like they don't have any armies. They don't have enough men. They can't do much. Like there's just frail empire that just can't really do much. It's just what happened there. Like how'd they go from just having this massive amount of armies to really no armies? I'm not going to get into just all the little things that cause that, but you definitely get that feel. So now, no longer adapt to new circumstances, especially in those last 100 years of the existence of the Roman Empire. The Western Roman Empire they stop adapting. Now, again, especially when we talk about the Punic Wars, I gave you a lot, and the Samnite Wars and things like that. I gave you examples of how the Romans adapt, and that legion system was a great adaptation. But when you get into this last 100 years, it's like, well, I'm Roman, and so you should always basically just make sure that I'm Roman, and that's the way things are, and we're just better than you, and I don't have to change to meet new challenges. Basically, I don't have to change to meet new trials, and you definitely see that as you look at the last 100 years of their history. They're just not. That adaptation isn't there. Like they'll do little things here and there that isn't necessarily changes. It's more of just like, okay, we'll deal with this now, but we're not really going to hold to it. So we talked about this too, but corrupt officials and emperors, like majorly corrupt, it becomes just run of the mill, like it's a normal thing. Is these corrupt officials and these corrupt emperors. There's some good ones here and there, people that are trying to do the right thing, but they always just get assassinated, and the bad ones get assassinated too. And you get this idea that in the end of the empire, like anybody that really wants to do something good for their country realizes you don't want to get in politics to do it, because that's just getting into a cesspool of vipers and things like that, and just this swamp of almost just this corrupt evilness, and like you just don't want to get involved with it. And of course, that right there is already setting up for a major fall, because you're going to have the wrong people at the top. They're all just greedy people. They're just going at it with each other, assassinating each other and things like that in order to just gain more power. And it's not about what the empire really is, the people of Rome and just the existence of hopefully having a good life. Yeah. Sorry. And then last up, with those things in place, the idea of not holding traditional values, they're no longer adapting. You got just basically a massively corrupt government all around that doesn't really care about the people underneath them. When the barbarians come in and do their thing, it's like they're cracking an empty egg. You know, whereas it was going to happen. Like at some point when that hammer came down on that eggshell, it was going to crack. There's no way it wouldn't crack under the weight of those barbarian invasions. Now, most history books you read, they'll basically say that the fall of Rome came about because of barbarian invasions, which is true. But I hope after everything I just explained here for you, that you understand that the fall of Rome came because they basically destroyed themselves from the inside out first, and the barbarians just ended it for them. So, with that being said, I'll just end this lesson here. This ends our unit on Rome. Just know I have skipped a ton of stuff. I mean, there's 1,000 years worth of stuff. And anyways, and I highly encourage you, if you found any of this interesting, you wanted to know more, please go look it up. Go find out more. And with that, I will see you guys later.